Listen closely, for the psyche is a vast continent whose maps are drawn in dream symbols and half-remembered sensations, and tonight we journey across its hidden frontiers. What you once called coincidence, the gaze that made you turn, the dream that proved prophetic, was never random at all. It was the whisper of your own unconscious reaching through the veil. Carl Jung taught that every psychic event announces itself in image and emotion before intellect can seize it. And so the tingling at the nape of your neck is not superstition, but the subtle voice of instinct asking you to awaken. Look about. There is the visible world of traffic lights and balance sheets, and alongside it the invisible kingdom of archetypes, where the hero, the shadow, and the sage conduct their silent parliament. We stand with one foot in each realm, breathing modern air yet guided by motifs as ancient as firelight on a cave wall. Your inner vision is no ornament, it is the compass by which the self navigates toward wholeness. Individuation, that lifelong pilgrimage from fragmentation to unity, depends on reclaiming the eyes that children forget how to use once algorithms begin to edit their reality and hustle culture hammers them flat. Remember when you were 5 and spoke to the night sky as though it could answer? That was not naive fantasy. It was direct commerce with the collective unconscious, a conversation Silicon Valley could never fully monetize. The modern survivalist must therefore master two terrains, the digital jungle of pinging screens and the mythic forest of symbols. When you scroll social media and feel anxiety bloom like nettles beneath the skin, the psyche protests against algorithmic control. Your inner vision, once activated, sees the newsfeed for what it is, a hall of mirrors where personas preen, yet refuses to be hypnotized because it now serves something deeper than dopamine metrics. Training this subtle sight begins in conscious silence, that rarefied chamber between thoughts where the ego cannot intrude. Sit, breathe, and let your awareness descend like a diver slipping beneath waves. As the chatter recedes, the numinous depths reveal themselves. There swims the anima if you are outwardly masculine, the animus if you are outwardly feminine, each longing to be integrated. Jung said the meeting of two personalities resembles the contact of two chemicals. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. So too within, when opposites converge, introvert and extrovert, rational and irrational, new energy is released. A psychic libido that illuminates dreams and synchronicities. 7 mindful breaths can carry you there, each exhalation dusting off an ancient window until translucent panes suddenly become transparent and the unseen glimmers through. Across this threshold lies the blind spot of consciousness, that twilight between wakefulness and sleep where images bubble up unfiltered by reason. Most people race across it nightly like commuters ignoring wildflowers by the tracks. Yet if you linger, you will witness the shadow emerging from the mist. Unspoken envy, money trauma handed down generations, repressed grief hiding beneath toxic positivity. Do not flee. To look away is to chain the monster in the basement. To face it is to discover its fangs are keys. Modern burnout is often the shadow in disguise, warning that the soul refuses further exploitation. If you befriend it, you transform hustle into flow state, wealth into stewardship, labor into creative play. Thus, the forgotten gift is reclaimed, not as superstition, but as practical psychology, for a Gen Z navigating an AI-tilted job market where identities update faster than smartphone firmware. Notice how brain waves dance, beta for deadlines, alpha for daydreams, theta for deep intuition, delta for the oceanic oneness. When you lengthen each exhale and pause in the hush afterward, you coax awareness from noisy marketplaces into candlelit cathedrals of thought. In theta, you may glimpse archetypal figures offering guidance, the hermit urging minimalism, the lover teaching relational attunement, the warrior redefining power as presence instead of domination. Such visions are not escapism. They are blueprints for action. A parent who dialogues with the inner child becomes less reactive. A coder who consults the inner sage writes cleaner, kinder algorithms. The psyche speaks symbolic, yet its counsel becomes concrete the moment you enact it in breakfast conversations or budget spreadsheets. Resistance will arrive wearing 4 masks. First, doubt, murmuring that this journey is fantasy. Greet it with curiosity and it turns into discernment, sharpening your perception. Next, fear, warning you that self-knowledge might unravel comfortable fictions. Thank it for its vigilance and it becomes respect for the unknown. Then impatience, tapping its foot in the age of one-click gratification. Breathe through it until it ripens into patience, the soil where deep roots grow. Finally, the spiritual ego appears, declaring you superior because you meditate, bow to it, laugh, and continue sweeping the floor. These guardians polish humility, the true badge of maturity. Only when humility roots can visionary branches reach skyward without snapping in the storm of hubris. Some evening, when dishes clink and streetlights flicker on, a subtle click may echo inside. Colors sharpen, a friend's laughter rings like temple bells, and you realize you are both observer and participant in a luminous drama. Synchronicities cluster, numbers repeating on receipts, lyrics finishing private thoughts, yet you remain calm, as though recognizing familiar handwriting on the margins of reality. This is not escape from the world, but full arrival within it. To borrow Jung's words, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. Therefore, guideposts replace commandments. Your awakening might nudge you toward quitting a prestige job to teach art, or toward staying put, yet infusing spreadsheets with archetypal clarity. Individuation never copies and pastes, it custom codes. Yet visions must be brought home. Integration begins where enlightenment ends. Bills, toddlers, algorithms, and traffic. Carry silence into boardrooms by pausing before you speak. Shepherd breath into commutes by noticing the skyline mirrored on a phone screen instead of doom scrolling. Invite the shadow to your budget meeting by acknowledging the lineage of scarcity fears that shape financial decisions. Wealth psychology flowers when transparency meets empathy. Relationship advice shifts from tactics to presence. You listen not only to words, but to the myth playing out between 2 nervous systems. Conflict then becomes alchemy, turning projection into shared growth. And when burnout looms, you heed the psyche's red light, not as failure, but as initiation. Time to recalibrate rhythm, perhaps adopt a minimalist mindset, perhaps seek restorative solitude. Time itself bends. Minutes stretch like molten glass when you inhabit them fully, yet weeks flash past when you sleepwalk. Through inner vision, you learn to surf kairos, the opportune moment, rather than drown in chronos, the ticking clock. You pick up a novel and a random line answers the day's unspoken question. This is no trick of fate, but evidence that unconscious pattern recognition outpaces conscious reasoning. The world is your dream, and dreams are your private world stage, both crafted by the same imaginal intelligence. Interpreting them, you decode nightly cinema where the house represents identity. The flood sweeps away outdated beliefs. The stranger invites an undeveloped trait. Thus, nocturnal theater informs diurnal choices, bridging invisible and visible with walkable planks. Grounding practices keep you moored. Journal the image before it fades. Walk beneath trees to discharge psychic static. Share insights selectively with companions who respect mystery. Not every revelation is a tweet. Some truths need gestation like wine in oak barrels. Uncorked too early, they sour in daylight. Hold them until humility outweighs exhibition. Meanwhile, design digital habits with ritual intent. Unfollow accounts that trigger comparison, curate feeds that spark curiosity, schedule screen fasts that let intuition breathe. Algorithm control becomes self-control when you write the code of your attention. Soon the extraordinary feels ordinary, the final paradox. Inner and outer blur, yet chores persist. You sweep the floor, aware the dust swirling in sunlight resembles galaxies, but you still sweep. You check bank statements. Aware numbers are modern talismans of survival instinct, but you still budget. True awakening does not evacuate life, it saturates it. It grants a steady center from which emotion can surge without capsizing identity. Sorrow visits, and you welcome it as rain. Joy bursts forth, and you ride its crest without clinging. This poised flexibility is the hallmark of a psyche that has tasted its own infinity. Every spiral of growth revisits familiar ground with subtler understanding. The identity crisis that once felt catastrophic becomes compost for new growth. The AI job market transforms from menace to canvas. When you realize creativity, not repetition, is humanity's currency. Gen Z, born into digital flux, carries both the wound of overstimulation and the gift of adaptive imagination. Teach them shadow work, active imagination, and they will wield technology without being devoured by it. Minimalism is not deprivation, but discernment, clearing space for symbols to speak, for purpose to breathe. Flow state arises when skill kisses challenge, when ego dissolves into the task, when doing aligns with being. This is the everyday miracle, accessible whether coding, cooking, or comforting a friend. So we continue, breath to breath, image to image, until the psyche's once forbidden contours become familiar terrain. The journey has no final summit, only expanding vistas. To paraphrase Jung, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And once you have walked that subterranean corridor and emerged beneath the star-studded sky of your own becoming, you understand that the light was inside the darkness all along, waiting for the courage of your gaze. Yet the road unfurls further, like a ribbon of moonlit water that always seems to vanish just beyond the next dune. Walk it, and you notice that even fatigue acquires a voice. Groaning muscles, blinking eyes, a sigh rising from somewhere behind the sternum. That sound, too, is the psyche speaking. Burnout is not merely depleted energy. It is the somatic protest of a soul coerced into perpetual daylight by hustle culture's fluorescent glare. When we override rest with caffeine and notifications, the shadow contracts into a knot of tension, and anxiety spreads across the nervous system like static. The cure is not another optimization app, but rhythm, cycles of effort and withdrawal, inhalation and exhalation, streaming and silence. If you dare to honor that pulse, closing the laptop as twilight melts the sky, inner vision opens of its own accord, for nature rewards those who respect its tides. Digital life, however, is designed as a carnival that never sleeps. Algorithms, like mischievous trickster archetypes, learn your cravings, then dangle them as luminous breadcrumbs that spiral into endless scroll. Recognize the pattern, and you reclaim sovereignty. Before each click, pause. Feel the subtle tug inside your chest. Is it curiosity or compulsion? That instant of mindful hesitation is a psychic lever powerful enough to lift you out of algorithmic hypnosis. Replace mindless consumption with active imagination. Envision the feed as a dream tableau. The influencer who sparks envy becomes an anima or animus figure urging you to develop neglected qualities. The political outrage post embodies the warrior demanding conscious engagement instead of reactive fury. In this way, the screen stops dictating your moods and starts reflecting your inner curriculum. Social media becomes alchemical glassware where raw emotion is distilled into lucid insight. As the inner lens clarifies, money, once a tangle of fear, desire, and taboo, reveals its symbolic core. Currency flows like blood, carrying nutrients of possibility through society's organism. Yet inherited money trauma can kink that flow. Ancestral memories of famine, bankruptcy, or colonial exploitation whisper scarcity even in times of plenty. Observe how your body reacts when checking an account balance. Does the stomach tighten, the breath shorten? Those sensations point toward a complex, demanding recognition. Dialogue with it. Ask what story it carries, whose voice it echoes. Perhaps you find a grandfather's Depression-era frugality lodged in your spine, or a parent's refrain that artists starve. Thank the protector for its vigilance, then invite a new archetype, the inner steward, who balances prudence with generosity. Wealth psychology, grounded in stewardship, ensures resources circulate toward creativity rather than calcifying into hoarded anxiety.
In relationships, the same principle applies. Every irritation is a semaphore from the unconscious. Your partner's tardiness may trigger rage not because of the delay, but because punctuality is the deity your childhood household worshiped. Lateness threatened belonging. By tracing present emotion to its mythic ancestor, you liberate both yourself and the one you love. Advice then shifts from surface tactics, send calendar invites, to depth work, which forgotten child part fears abandonment when schedules slip.
Introvert and extrovert, long considered opposites, become complementary channels. One listens to subterranean whispers, the other tests truths in sunlight. Together, they form a circulatory loop of perception and expression. Conflict, viewed through this lens, is not failure, but friction that polishes the gem of self-knowledge, if both parties agree to stay in the furnace until rough edges round. Gen Z enters this arena bearing paradox, digitally hyper-connected yet starved for genuine contact, vocally progressive yet haunted by climate dread and AI displacement. They inherit a planet of accelerating novelty, where occupations mutate faster than academic curricula. Teach them that identity is an evolving constellation, not a single fixed star. Job titles may evaporate, but core archetypal strengths, creator, healer, strategist, mediator, remain transferable across any economy the future invents. When layoffs hit because neural networks automate yesterday's tasks, the wound is real. Yet inside that wound glimmers the invitation to reroute talents toward emergent needs. The psyche, like an ecosystem after wildfire, sprouts unexpected green if one trusts the interval of charred silence. Dream interpretation becomes compass in such liminal times. Keep a notebook by the pillow. As you surface from sleep, harvest images before daylight bleaches them. A house with shifting rooms may signal an identity in renovation. A broken phone can symbolize a needed severance from constant connectivity. Record without judgment, then bring the symbols into active imagination. Converse with the house. Ask the phone what message refused to send. Jung said the dream is its own commentary, yet by continuing the dialogue in waking consciousness, you weave night and day into a single continuum, strengthening the bridge across which intuition travels. Synchronicity then multiplies, confirming that inner and outer worlds are chapters of one holographic story. Flow state, so prized by athletes and coders, is nothing more mystical than temporary alignment of ego with self. It occurs when challenge matches capacity and the judging mind slips backstage. The secret seldom taught is that flow can be cultivated through ritual, a brief breath practice, a phrase that signals the psyche it is safe to release control, a workspace stripped to minimalist essentials so attention has room to stretch. As you practice, you discover that flow is contagious. Your calm entrains colleagues' nervous systems, meetings transform from tug-of-war into jazz improvisation, and creativity leaps from solitary brilliance to collective resonance.
Toxic positivity, by contrast, is a masquerade where fear of shadow paints a clown's smile on every pain. True resilience speaks in a lower register. It is permissible to ache. The wound is the womb of tomorrow's insight. When someone confides despair, resist the impulse to plaster slogans. Instead, hold presence like a chalice. The psyche, feeling safe, will reveal the medicine nested inside suffering, perhaps a buried vocation, perhaps the need to end a lineage of silence. Empathy, not optimism, catalyzes that transmutation.
Minimalism follows naturally, not as austere denial but as strategic pruning. Each object, commitment, or digital subscription either nourishes the individuation process or siphons attention. Conduct a symbolic inventory, lay possessions in the mind's eye and notice which spark energy, which feel inert. Release the latter with gratitude. Space invites novelty. This is modern survival. Not stockpiling gadgets, but discerning what truly supports meaning when noise multiplies exponentially.
And so the spiral turns. Day yields to evening, screen glow to candle ember, breath to breath. Inner vision no longer feels like a borrowed telescope, but like your own retinas adjusting to starlight after centuries indoors. Somewhere a notification pings. You smile, not hooked, but choosing. Somewhere a dream stirs, ready to script the next lesson before dawn. Keep walking the moonlit ribbon. The path does not conclude, yet each step, fully inhabited, is arrival.
And still the psyche calls you onward, as though vast subterranean chambers lie waiting beneath every commonplace exchange. Perhaps tomorrow you will stand in a grocery queue and notice the hush that falls inside when you choose presence over distraction. Perhaps the cashier's weary smile will seem suddenly luminous, and you will sense two archetypes bowing through your bodies, the servant ennobled by the king humbled by the servant. In such moments, individuation leaves the lecture hall and steps into fluorescent aisles, proving at last that spirit is woven into plastic barcodes and mundane hellos.
Yet no one ascends without encountering the labyrinth of identity. In an era when avatars multiply like mirrors in a carnival booth, the question, "Who am I?" ricochets through Gen Z minds late at night, lit only by blue screens. The trickster algorithm tempts them to curate ever-shifting masks: gamer, activist, side hustler, micro-influencer, until the self feels dispersed into pixels.
Jung would counsel withdrawal into the cave of active imagination. Close the laptop, light a single candle, and invite the cast of inner characters to speak one by one. Let the cheerleader of toxic positivity confess her exhaustion. Let the doom-scroll prophet admit he is terrified of silence. Let the forgotten poet step forward clutching a journal no platform ever sees. As each voice is honored, the center consolidates. The many become one, not by erasing difference, but by discovering a harmonizing axis around which they can revolve. Money, career, romance, every sphere now becomes theater for this newly coherent self. Take the AI job market, humming just beyond the cubicle walls, promising efficiency while triggering existential dread. Here the anxiety is not merely economic but archetypal. The ancient fear of obsolescence, of being replaced by a younger sibling, in this case, silicon-bodied. The remedy is twofold: cultivate adaptive skill and deepen symbolic vision. Practical upskilling, data literacy, creative problem-solving fortifies the outer life, while inner work reveals vocations no machine can automate: meaning-making, ethic crafting, soul-holding. Thus, the tension between carbon and code becomes a crucible in which authentic purpose is refined. Relationship dynamics shift as well. The extrovert, once praised for high-octane networking, might discover a yearning for the introvert's contemplative depth. The introvert, inspired by the partner's social fluency, steps tentatively into wider circles. Each mirrors the other's undeveloped potential. Together, they enact the coniunctio, the sacred marriage where opposites interpenetrate. Conflicts over chores, schedules, or texting frequency then appear less like battlegrounds and more like dream symbols begging interpretation. One night you dream of two wolves circling the same fire, one silver, one black. The next morning, an argument erupts about how often to visit the in-laws. The dream suggests both instincts guard the hearth. Mediation lies in acknowledging that the black wolf's caution is as valuable as the silver wolf's enthusiasm. Insight diffuses resentment, yielding intimacy that thrives on difference instead of demanding conformity. Burnout recovery, meanwhile, is not a return to normal, but an awakening to an entirely new rhythm. Picture the psyche as a forest floor. Years of overwork have matted the soil. Nothing fresh can sprout. You rest, and mycelial threads of imagination begin weaving under the mulch. Soon, ideas push upward. Simpler routines, hollow hours reserved for art, maybe a minimalist mindset that swaps 9 cheap thrills for one experience richly savored. Rest, then, is not idleness, but photosynthesis. Outwardly, you sleep. Inwardly, chlorophyll is produced, fueling the next creative bloom. Synchronicities increase as clutter decreases. You declutter a closet and find a forgotten sketchbook. The very evening, a friend texts asking for help designing a mural. You recycle old books about careers you no longer desire, and suddenly a podcast episode lands in your feed about turning hobbies into income streams. These correspondences are not cosmic party tricks, but evidence that, as the conscious attitude realigns, the unconscious responds with guiding signals. Follow them humbly, neither inflating their importance nor dismissing them, and they become a trustworthy compass through the fog of modern uncertainty. Shadow work deepens at this stage, for light thrown farther casts darker silhouettes. Perhaps you notice irritation flaring at influencers preaching hustle while you rebuild a slower life. Examine that heat, and you may uncover envy of their bold risk-taking or guilt over your own lingering ambition. Rather than shaming the impulse, seat it at your inner round table. Ask, what do you need? Envy might answer, permission to shine without burning out. Integrate that message and your creativity gains velocity free of self-betrayal. Eventually, a quiet revolution dawns. Self-improvement no longer feels like patching a leaky vessel, but like navigating with wind instead of oars. You still set goals, finish the thesis, save for travel, nurture health, but each objective arises from the heart's cadence rather than externals. Even setbacks serve. A missed promotion becomes an oracle pointing toward entrepreneurship. A breakup redirects energy into community projects that birth unexpected friendships. Life stops happening to you and starts collaborating with you. And through it all, dream interpretation remains a nightly counsel. Keep sketching their landscapes, annotating colors, mapping the recurring symbols, staircases, elevators, tidal waves, in a margin next to daily events. Over months, you'll see patterns. Elevators appear whenever career decisions loom. Tidal dreams accompany emotional surges tied to lunar cycles. Such longitudinal data transforms hunches into empirical gnosis, proving to the rational mind that the irrational holds quantifiable wisdom. So the spiral ascends, visible world, invisible world, a double helix twining through every breath. In ancient myths, heroes returned bearing elixirs. In this modern saga, your elixir is presence, distilled through silence, rituals, and compassionate gaze. Offer it in board meetings by naming unspoken tensions, in parenting by validating a child's nightmare, in social media by posting an honest uncertainty amid curated triumphs. Presence ripples outward, rendering survival not a lonely scramble but a collective endeavor toward wholeness. Soon you realize the labyrinth never ends. It simply widens until walls dissolve and the journey becomes its own destination. Nothing extraordinary happens, yet everything is transformed. The kettle whistles, the dog sleeps, the sun slides across the wall, and you stand at the center of a universe that finally feels like home. And so you move through your days like a cartographer of the invisible, pen poised for whatever coastline of meaning rises next from the mist. A lunchtime breeze brushes your cheek, and suddenly you sense the ancient wanderer nodding approval, urging you to notice how that single gust carries the scent of everywhere you have yet to travel. Trivialities blur into hieroglyphs. The commuter beside you fiddling with earbuds becomes a living emblem of dual attention. One chord tied to the outer world, one strung inward toward the music of the soul. In that instant, you recognize your own mission, to weave these realms so deftly that no stitch shows, and yet the fabric is stronger than before. Slowly, habits recalibrate. When news headlines flash their voltage of alarm, you pause, breathe down into the belly, and let the guardian of discernment step forward. It sorts signal from shriek, reminding you that algorithmic architectures thrive on cortisol and clicks. Your liberated attention is therefore a quiet act of rebellion, a recapture of psychic sovereignty. Minutes later, you're drafting an email, and the phrase, "I hope this finds you well," suddenly feels like more than etiquette. It lands as a blessing, an invocation that your correspondent's inner tribe may also awaken from the trance of urgency. Work becomes ritual. Each keystroke echoes a mantra: generosity, clarity, alignment. Dreams keep pace, unveiling subtler mentors. One night, a vast library opens before you, shelves stacked with unwritten books whose titles shimmer then vanish. A silver-haired librarian gestures toward a blank volume stamped with your own name. You lift it and feel pages tingling under your fingertips. Stories that will crystallize only if you live them. Waking, you understand. Purpose is not found. It is authored in real time, line by line, through choices that harmonize outer task with inner calling. Anxiety subsides, for the path does not demand omniscience, only willingness to scribe the next honest sentence. The psyche, like any wilderness, honors reciprocity. Offer it attention and it offers guidance. You begin setting a small bowl of water on your desk each dawn, a token for the unconscious to drink from while you labor. Some mornings, amid spreadsheets, a sudden intuition ripples the surface. Call an old friend, revise that proposal, rest now. You obey more readily, trusting that such promptings arise from strata deeper than mere impulse. Results follow. Projects align, collaborations click, emotional weather stabilizes. You note them without fanfare, aware that synchronicity, like wild deer, startles if bragged about too loudly. Even setbacks arrive draped in meaning. A strained back forces you to slow. During those enforced breaths between movements, insight surfaces about the way you carry other people's burdens without consent. The injury heals, but the lesson reconfigures how you listen, how you say yes, how you decline. Mental health, once a discrete concern, merges with spiritual hygiene. Adequate sleep as sacrament, laughter as purification, honest tears as baptism. On difficult evenings, you sit with the shadow by candlelight and let it narrate its grievances. The simple act of hearing them, without judgment, without fix-it reflex, transforms their timbre from threat to guidance. Dark becomes fertile, and you feel the subterranean roots of future courage thickening.
Money, too, changes tone. You still track expenses, save diligently, negotiate fees, yet the underlying question has shifted from, "How much am I worth?" to, "How freely can value circulate through me?" You invest in skill-building courses not out of scarcity panic, but out of reverence for the evolving self that seeks tools equal to its vision. Wealth becomes a river. Stagnant hoarding breeds mosquitoes of fear. Generous flow irrigates common fields. Even a small tip to the barista now feels like a libation poured for the unseen network that sustains civic life. Relationships flourish under this ethos of circulation. Conversations tilt from exchange of data to exchange of presence. Instead of offering advice reflexively, you ask, "What does your heart need right now?" and are willing to wait through the silence that follows. Some friendships deepen, others drift away on separate currents, yet you release them without resentment, confident that wider tides of purpose steer every vessel home. By dusk, you stroll beneath streetlights, tracing how shadows lengthen across pavement, and you realize the journey has turned inside out. Once you sought extraordinary visions flashing like comets, now you relish ordinariness shimmering with quiet divinity. The electric hum of a lamppost, the rhythm of your footfall, the soft click of a neighbor's gate, each becomes a syllable in the ongoing dialogue between Psyche and cosmos. You are both listener and lyricist, tuning the instrument of awareness to the great orchestration that never ceases.
And when sleep finally folds around you, there is no boundary, only continuum. The night sea rises, cradling you in star-flecked waves, and somewhere in that vastness, the dream librarian smiles. Inked pages flutter, and a new chapter begins. Unmapped, unhurried, inevitable.